Hi and welcome to MIG Training. Today I'm going to show you medium haircut number 1. There are 9 haircuts in the MIG cutting program and this is number 3. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure the hair is clean and washed and conditioned, and if you're dealing with longer blonde hair, sometimes it's a nice idea to put some detangling solution on the hair. Then you want to find the center part and you want to take a center section from right at the front and all the way down to the back of the nape. I'm using the wide teeth part of my comb, that way I'm sectioning nice and cleanly, and then I'm going to take a horizontal section across. Depending on how thick the hair is how thick or fine your section should be. I'm dealing with finer hair at the nape here, so my first section to start off with is a little bit thicker, as our finer hairline at the back won't be what we're cutting into. So I'm making sure my horizontal section is nice and even on both sides. I'm spending a bit of time on this. This is where you want to make sure that you're spending your time. That way it's nice and even, because this will start off your whole haircut. You can see that my line does have a slight diagonal because that's the outline shape that I'm aiming for the overall result. So not dealing with like a straight across line, I'm dealing with something slightly diagonal. By keeping length at the front is what I'm after. So once you've created your first section, just stand back, have a little look at it and make sure it's even. And if it's not, go back and redo it. You want to also make sure that when you're combing the hair up that you're twisting it and keeping it out of the way. That way when you're combing to first cut, you're not going to pull any hair down from other sections. So the first part that I'm going to start cutting is in the middle. So I'm taking about a 3 centimeter wide section and I'm combing the hair down at natural fall or 0 degrees, and then I'm going to cut the hair straight across. I'm using my fingers to cut, but I'm not cutting straight on my fingers because my fingers aren't straight. So I'm just working from the middle towards the outside, taking my time, making sure it's nice and square. Each time you want to make sure that you're combing the hair nice and even, and that you've got the most even tension on the hair. You don't want to pull too much and you don't want to have not enough tension, otherwise that will create an uneven line. This is one of our medium haircuts, so I'm aiming for the hair to just skim the shoulder blades when it's finished. So I'm combing the hair down nice and flat. Now I'm just cutting it straight onto the skin or the cape, making sure that I've got a really straight line. Spend a bit of time, make sure that this is perfect, as this is your guide. If this is out, your whole haircut will be out. Check for balance. I do this by grabbing each section from the side and feeling. Then you're going to continue this technique all the way up the head. You can see my sections are somewhat larger. If I was dealing with thick hair or perhaps curly hair, I would deal with a smaller section, but I've got lovely virgin straight blonde hair here today, so I can go in a little bit thicker with my sections. Still working with that diagonal forward section. You want to just mimic exactly what you did on your first section. So again, you're just going to comb the hair straight down. I'm using the finer part of my comb now with the teeth. That way they're a little bit closer together and I get a little bit more tension on the hair. So you want to cut straight on that line. Don't cut below it and don't cut into it. So you want to cut straight on that initial guideline. This haircut will work for most lengths. So you can see here my consultation with my model, she was quite happy to have a big change. So I am taking a lot of hair off. But again, this haircut is something that's versatile and it can be used if you're just going to keep a lot of length as well. So directing all the hair back, you don't want to kind of swing it up over the shoulder. That will round your baseline. You want to keep your baseline nice and square. Take your time, make sure you're checking it, going over, getting any little lumps and bumps out, making sure that it's as square as it can be. I find combing it down and pushing it straight on the skin or on the cape will help me find any kind of knuckle marks that are hanging out there, and then I remove them. Again, we're going to just do the same thing. Move your client around too if they're in the wrong position. Don't move your body to suit it. You want to make sure that you can move them and that you're comfortable. So again, you're just going to repeat the same technique. You can see I'm just really kind of taking more hair off from the sides now, and that's just the angle of my section. But I do start in the middle just to make sure if there's any kind of little fluffy bits that I'm removing that first. So then I'm going to just work on the other side. I do find with cutting hair that I favour one side, so I find my left side the easiest one to cut, and then as I get to my right, this is the time that I have to spend a little bit more. It's not my preferred side to cut. So double checking is always the best thing to do. Take your time when you're learning. You don't want to rush through a haircut. You want to make sure that you're spending as much time as possible and making it nice and lovely. And that'll just save you in the long run of having to fix anything when it's dry. Now I'm taking out my sides. And dealing with finer blonde hair, you'll find that the sides, there's not an awful lot of hair, but the best thing to kind of get used to doing is taking a really good halo section when joining in the sides. You don't want to treat the sides differently to the rest. So sometimes you might not be cutting off an awful lot of hair, but sometimes it's a good idea to just get used to doing that section where you're taking the halo, which is what I'm just about to do now, which incorporates the back to the front. That way you've got this even line and your line is going to follow that when you start cutting the hair. Again, it's slightly diagonal so that I'm keeping that shape throughout the whole baseline. So just double checking that you're even on both sides. It can be a little bit harder when you get to the front, so having a little kind of squiz from the front's the best way. Obviously I'm cutting this for a video, but if you're in a salon, you normally do this in the mirror and you just use the mirror for your balance. When you're going to cut the front, you want to keep directing it to the back. So you want to make sure that you're over directing that front section back to keep that square line. This will create an elongated shape as well as keeping the length of the front. So again, starting in the middle, even if there's nothing to cut, it's just a really good habit to get used to. Sometimes you can find there might be the tiniest bit of hair to remove. So standing in the back and making sure that you're over directing the hair back towards you. So combing that hair over the shoulder and continuation of that straight line. You're just going to repeat on the other side exactly what you did. Take your time. Make sure you're not pulling it too tight too. You are going to deal with a little bit more stretch as you're dealing with the ear as well. Check for balance. And if you find that you've got a little bit extra length on one side, go back and make sure that you can find it and then just take it off. Once you're happy with that, drop down the rest of the hair and you're going to do the exact same thing. There won't be an awful lot to cut on my model here as she had finer hair and she did have layers previously. If you were dealing with thicker hair, you might have to take another section. It just all depends on the hair type. This is where you want to make sure that you're combing the hair in the natural fall. You don't have any funny parts or anything like that. Again, directing that front back so that you're going to keep that elongated shape. You can see there's only minimal hair to take off. So then you're going to do the exact same on the other side. And just double check for balance, making sure that it's nice and even. Sometimes it's a good idea to give the hair a bit of a shake, see how it's sitting, making sure there's no longer bits. So that's the solid done. Now we're going to tackle our layer system. So we're going to create a center guide section. It's roughly going to be 2 centimeters wide and it's directly down the center. This is going to be where we create our guideline, and it's also going to be the shortest point of the hair. So you want to spend a little bit of time making sure that it's nice and even on both sides, because if it's not, you can imagine your haircut wouldn't be even then. So I'm going to just have a look at everything before I choose how much I'm going to cut off. So sometimes it's a nice idea to comb it forward, see where it's going to fall if you were going to cut your layer. This is a really soft layer system, so it's not something to be too scared about. It's actually a nice starting point when you're learning how to layer hair on medium length hair. So I'm going to cut my first section first. This is where I'm creating my guide, and I'm just making sure that's going to be my shortest point. So the layers are going to sit well below her chin level. Then combing that directly up, straight up from the head. I'm going to work with a somewhat square shape at the top here, and I'm going to continue that line to be cut nice and square and straight across. Then we're combing it straight up. And you can see this is my center guide. Combing it straight up, only working with small sections of hair so you're not getting overwhelmed. And I'm going to continue on that square line so you can see I'm cutting straight across. This is going to be the shortest point of the layer system. So if you're finally pulling it up and there's nothing to cut back, so sometimes it's a good idea to go back and reevaluate how much you're cutting off. So pulling it up directly from the top of the head and creating a square line. I am working with this guide all the way down the head, just making sure that I'm capturing any hair that's long. I want to make sure that my layers are all seamless and blended through the haircut. I'm not looking for any disconnection. So combing it straight up and just seeing if there's any little corner that I need to remove. If the hair falls away, don't cut it, forget about it, it's not going to reach. So once I've created that, then I'm coming out slightly to follow the curve of the head. So I'm square at the front and slightly rounded at that crown area. That way I've got some kind of layer system that's going to follow the shape of the head and be a little bit softer rather than such a hard straight line. Just going back and making sure that it's all clean and I don't have any knuckle marks or any squiggly little bits missed. This is a good idea to always go through and make sure that you double check your guide. Once you're happy with that, then you're going to part this guide in half. I find the best way to find a true center is to come over the top of the client, find the center of their nose, and then drag that line all the way down to the nape. It can take a little bit of getting used to, and sometimes it's always a good idea to do it a couple of times before you're happy. So once I've got my center part, I'm then going to section one side out of the way and I'm going to cut one side at a time. So I'm not being overwhelmed, I'm dividing the hair into half. So you've got your front section and then you've got your back section. This also can kind of demonstrate to your client that you're quite clean and precise with your work. It's not just big messy sections of hair just being combed every which way. So then I'm going to take a 2 centimeter deep section and I'm going to comb that straight back into that middle section, but I'm standing on the opposite side so I can see where my guide is, so I'm directing the hair to myself. So I'm directing the hair straight into the middle, I'm finding my guide and I'm cutting that straight off. So double checking, making sure that I haven't missed any little bits. Again, you would be doing this in front of a mirror so you can have a really good, clear idea. So once I'm happy with that section, then I'm going to continue with it through the back. Again, standing on the other side so I can see my guide, I'm going to comb that hair straight up into the middle. Always move your client's head around. They think they're being helpful by moving it, but you put them in the spot that you need them to be. Combing it, finding my guide, double checking it, and then cutting. So again, like I said before, when we're creating that guide, you always want to come down and get all of that hair to be lifted up at the back. That way you're not missing anything. Sometimes it might surprise you. There might be a random long bit of hair that you need to get rid of. So always making sure that you're grabbing all of that. The only hard part about this haircut is getting used to having a lot of hair in your hands and holding it up. So it does take a little bit of getting used to. And that's why we kind of tend to push this haircut towards more of a medium length hair type. Dealing with it on longer hair sometimes can be a little bit of a challenge, especially if it's blonde hair. It can get tangly when you're starting to lift it up. Take your time. There's no rush with this, especially when you're learning. You want to make sure that you're really getting a good grasp of what you're doing. You don't want to be trying to complete this haircut in 20 minutes. So once I'm happy with that, then I'm going to go back and I'm going to do the last bit that I left out, that I've just taken the clip out. Making sure that the hair's kept wet when you're cutting, not dripping wet, but you don't want it to dry out, otherwise you'll have a hard time getting even tension. So I'm just working small bits, making sure that I'm grabbing everything. You can see how often I comb the hair too. That's a really good habit to get used to, is combing the hair continually, making sure that you've got it nice and even and good tension. So I'm just double checking. The shorter the layering that you started with will be more hair that you cut off. Because this is a really soft, kind of almost invisible layer, there's not a lot of hair to be cut off. So you'll find as I keep working through my sections that I'm only taking small, minimal amounts off. Now I'm going to work with all the rest of the hair. So this hair above the ear is being over directed, and then the hair is all being directed into that center part. So technically the hair should be shorter in the middle and it'll get longer as it gets towards the outline of the hair. And you can see that there's probably not an awful lot to be cut off here, but you don't want to skip this. You don't want to think, oh yeah, it'll be fine. You want to make sure that you're going through and being really thorough. You want to be mindful of your client too, that she doesn't have hair hanging in her face. So sometimes it's a nice idea to comb it and have it out of the way. So now I've got all that back section all in my hands. I'm combing it up. This will take you a little bit of time to get used to. I'm just checking if there's any corners that I need to get rid of, which there aren't. And that's that first side of my layer system complete. Give it a little shake, have a look. Okay, so we're moving on to the other side. We're going to just show you the reverse angle. That way you can see it from a different point of view. We've also sped it up, just that way you're not watching the same thing over again. Okay, so once you finish it up, I just give it a little shake. Now I'm going to come through and I'm going to cross check. I'm just making sure that I haven't missed anything. There's no random bits of hair sticking up and doing their own strange little dance. So I'm just checking, going through horizontally on both sides and just making sure that it goes from a slight shorter in the interior, getting out to longer on the exterior. It's quite hard to see on camera, but it's a good idea to always cross-check your work before moving on to your blow drying part. That's it, I'm happy with my cross check. So now I'm going to just do some blow drying. We've spread this up as well. But the first thing I always do is I always start with my front hairline. I usually use my comb to just get it to sit smooth so there's no crazy cowlicks going on. And then I'm just going through with a round brush and my blow dryer. And I'm going to just smooth it out. And I'm also going to do some iron work. So just have a little watch and then I'll catch it on the end for our texturizing. Okay, so for texturizing, personalizing, and checking your work, I always do this on dry hair. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check my solid line just to make sure that there's no graduation. So graduation is a buildup of weight, and it normally happens when you cut solid through your fingers. So you get a slight elevation, which causes graduation. So combing the hair down and then just seeing if I can find any little bits of hair that are going to poke out. This will just make sure that your client, when she's walking around or reading a book or looking down at her phone, that her haircut doesn't look uneven. So going through, spending a bit of time making sure my line's nice and clean and straight. I spent a bit of time on the sides as I over-directed these back to a square line. You might find sometimes there might have been a little bit of hair that was caught behind the ear, or finer hair types, maybe it's jumped up a little bit. I just want to make sure that I've got a nice clean line over that ear area. So using my hands as I've got fine blonde hair, just to make sure that it doesn't look weird or doing anything random. And if it is, just come and take those little bits off. So now as I'm going to do some texturizing, we're just going to do some point cutting. I'm not going in too deeply as the hair's lovely and fine already. It doesn't need too much, but this will just kind of break up any hard lines. Just get it to swing, give it a little bit of personality. So I only texturize the same way that I cut it, so I'm not picking anything up in a different angle as to what I was before. It's just making sure that it's just got a little bit more of seamlessness to it. So if you're new to point cutting, take your time, but you want to make sure that you're putting the scissors straight into the hair. You're not coming on an angle. If you were to come on an angle, you'll actually start to remove length as well. This is just about reducing bulk and getting it to be nice and soft. Doing a tiny little bit of slicing just more at the back, just to kind of give it a little bit of a swing. Slicing is a really fun technique, but it does take a little bit of practice to get used to, and you also need to make sure your scissors are nice and sharp. How much slicing and point cutting you do is really up to yourself. This is more about where you're going to build your clientele, and your personality will come through in your haircuts. So I'm a little bit cautious and a little bit more on the classic side, but each to their own. So you can see I really kind of more point cut through the front and do my slicing at the back. Slicing is one of the biggest ways to remove bulk. I just don't want to do too much of that, especially around the ear area, as I could cause a giant hole. That's it. It's all finished. I'm giving it a little shake, making sure it feels nice, it feels balanced. Having a quick little look, getting her to do a little shake as well. That's it. Thanks very much for watching.